which I think we should probably get going on right now, as we're right at the top of the hour. I know we have a lot to cover. So for those of you I don't know, my name is Gabe Ashleman, and I'm the board president for the Mountaineers. I'm a Mountaineers member, and I'm also a volunteer with the Mountaineers, like many of you. We have a lot to cover this evening, but and we want to make sure we provide a lot of time for questions and conversation at the end. But first, I wanted to start by acknowledging that we are on the land stewarded by Indigenous communities in the past, present, and future. And I think about this a lot when I'm out adventuring the Cascades or when I'm exploring the green spaces in and around my home. I know we could all benefit greatly from developing a better understanding of the traditional knowledge held by Indigenous communities, and this will really only happen through authentic long-term engagement. Yesterday, I was able to join the Conservation and Advocacy Committee, and I'm super excited by the work they're leading to build relationships with Indigenous communities. So stay tuned for an upcoming blog post on this topic and more details in the Conservation Currents. And I believe since you're all members, you should be receiving the Conservation Currents, but if not, I'll drop a link in the chat so that you're all able to subscribe to that. It's a really amazing resource. So super happy to see everybody tonight. Before the pandemic, we used to hold this meeting in person. And I think it's probably fair to say for those who attended, it was not the most well-attended meeting. And it's really unfortunate because we had some pretty amazing content that was shared by staff and the board and the rest of the team. And so when the pandemic started, we started holding this meeting virtually. It's amazing to see how many people are signed up for it and join. So we're super excited to have you all here. And since we are virtual, I did want to mention a few logistical items. Please keep yourself on mute when you're not speaking. During the Q&A, try to use the raise hand feature. And as Tom mentioned in the comments, and I think Becca did too, try to rename yourself to your actual name. This will help with attendance tracking, and it can be done by clicking the 3 little dots in the top right-hand corner. Okay, so we have a full agenda, as I mentioned. I'm going to quickly run through a little bit of it, but I don't want to get in the way here much longer. First, we'll hear from Tom Vogel, CEO, who will share highlights from the past year. Then Tom Helleberg will share an update from Mountaineers Books. And he'll have to correct me on this, but Mountaineers Books is, like, I think, the largest nonprofit publisher of outdoor books in North America. And if I'm wrong on that, I can say unequivocally it is the best publisher. That's a little bit harder or easier to quantify. So we'll hear from him in a bit, and we'll hear an update on the strategic planning process, including the many opportunities for you all to help shape the direction of the organization. Lots coming up, lots of opportunities there. Then we'll go back to Tom Vogel for an update on the proposed bylaw changes. Some really exciting stuff here. This is part of a multi-year process to update our bylaws to really match the best practices in the sector. And finally, Manisha Pawar will share an update on board elections. And as I mentioned, we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end, but I don't want to be in the way anymore. So I'm going to turn it over to Tom Vogel for an update.
Great, thanks so much, Gabe. Yeah, so welcome everyone. I know the past couple of years have been really challenging for us, and they really reminded us how important our community is and how special the Mountaineers community is. And we debated whether to actually bring everyone together in person tonight for our annual meeting, but years past when we did our in-person annual meetings, we actually didn't have too many people that made it to the program center, and so we decided to continue with our Zoom format because it gave us the opportunity to really have more folks from across the organization participate in the annual meeting. And I'm showing 62 participants, which is really fantastic. So I thank you all for dialing in tonight to hear some of the updates that we're going to be sharing. So almost any time that I've connected with members over the last handful of months, one of the very first things they ask me is, how are the Mountaineers doing? And my answer is really the same almost every time, and it's very sincere. And it is, while we're not totally out of the woods in terms of coming out of the pandemic, we're doing really well. Things are getting back to normal, and we're really excited about the year to come. And so if you don't take anything away But one thing tonight, I just want you to take away that the Mountaineers is on really solid ground. And most importantly, we're heading in a direction that's really exciting. I think you're going to hear a lot about that tonight, and hopefully you'll hear some of that enthusiasm and excitement. One measure of the health of the Mountaineers right now is the health of our community. Our community is both growing and healthy. Before the pandemic, our membership had gotten to about 14,000 members, a little bit more than 14,000. But as we had to shut things down, we stopped doing our courses, and we were canceling our events and everything else. Membership dropped to about 13,000 in 2020. We've eclipsed 15,000 members already this year. And we're expecting membership to grow yet again about 6% next year. And we're feeling really confident about that. I want to underscore that, we don't think about growth for its own sake, but it's really about how are we fulfilling our mission and giving people the opportunity to connect with the outdoors through a community like the Mountaineers. And as we've been thinking about our strategic plan, we've been really, thinking deeply about, this idea of growth and how important it is. Or are we okay just to remain the same size that we are today? And the reason why continuing to grow is because it is the way that we're supporting our community, people that are wanting to connect with the outdoors and learn the skills to be safe and responsible doing the activities that we love. Another measure of our success is that our classes and events are getting back to our pre-pandemic levels. We're also continuing to support our volunteers through courses like Foundations of Leadership and Foundations of Instruction. And speaking of volunteers, we're back to basically about where we were before the pandemic at about 3,000 volunteers, which is absolutely amazing. So I see a lot of you on the call tonight, and we're just so incredibly grateful for everything you do to support the Mountaineers and our members. But it's really wonderful to see people re-engaging and getting back out and supporting our programs as volunteers. Another indication of the health of our community are people who support us financially. Our Peak Society are donors who contribute more than $1,000 a year to the Mountaineers. Before the pandemic, we were at 189 people that were Peak Society members in August of 2019. We're at 324 Peak Society members now, which is 70% growth in just about 3 years, which is absolutely amazing. And I see a lot of you on the call tonight. We're absolutely grateful for your support of the organization. Another way that people support the Mountaineers financially is by writing the Mountaineers into your will and expressing the interest in contributing to the Mountaineers as a legacy gift. And we have had 37 new members join Peak Society in just the last 3 years. We're now up to 56 Living Summit Society members, which is absolutely amazing. And if you are interested in more information about either of those two programs, feel free to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to connect with you and share more information about that. Another indication of the health of the organization is what we're doing to engage the next generation of Mountaineers and through our youth programs. We're doing a fantastic job of supporting families and young people. This year, we have provided already 12,000 youth experiences, which is absolutely amazing. That's up from about 8,500 last year and about 4,500 in 2020. So it's just absolutely amazing growth. And one of the things that I also really appreciate about our youth programs is that we're also reaching kids and families from historically underserved communities. So we've provided more than 1,000 mountain workshop participants, 2,500 experiences in the past year. And most of those kids are from historically underserved communities, which makes the outdoors more accessible for those that otherwise wouldn't have those opportunities, which is really great. We're also making the outdoors accessible through our gear library and through scholarships. And in the last year, we've provided 245 people with scholarships in the Mountaineers. And we've provided just this summer 1,000 gear library loans to 43 people, which also is just contributing to a more accessible, better outdoor experience for all people. And a third way that I'm just really proud of the work that we've done over the last year and the impact that we're having is through our conservation and advocacy efforts. One example of that is through Outdoor Alliance Washington, which is a collaboration of human-powered outdoor recreation organizations like the Mountaineers, Washington Trails, American Whitewater, the Access Fund, Surf Rider, et cetera. And we are leading that effort here in the state of Washington. And we're really on the forefront of engaging with our land managers and with our elected officials on advocating for issues that matter in terms of things like access, recreation, conservation of public lands, and the climate. By working closely with other organizations and speaking with one voice to our elected officials and land managers, we've got more impact than we could ever have on our own, which is really wonderful work. We're also doing a great job of reducing our own impact on the planet through things like our carbon footprint reduction effort. And a great example of that is in the past year, we've been working really diligently to try to reduce the impact of our fixed environment through our program centers. And we've made some really tremendous progress down at our Tacoma Program Center. And by the end of this year, we're going to be what's called net zero, which basically means that we'll be able to operate the Tacoma Program Center without consuming any carbon-based fuels. So we've converted all of our lights over to LCD. We've converted our gas-powered heating and water heaters over to heat pumps. And we're in the process of installing solar on the Tacoma Program Center. It was all made possible through donations that we received, as well as a grant that we received through Tacoma Power and Light. But it's just an example of, even during tough times like the pandemic, where we've been able to make progress on fulfilling our mission through things like our conservation and advocacy efforts. And all of this wouldn't have been possible without the amazing work of our volunteers and the incredible generosity of our donors. And it's not an overstatement to say that our community of volunteers and our donors is one of the main reasons why we're coming out of the pandemic in such great shape. Now, Gabe mentioned Mountaineers books in his opening, and I haven't mentioned it yet. And you're like, well, why haven't I mentioned that in our highlights? And it's because we're going to have a whole section here next that's going to be led by Tom Helleberg, our publisher. And we're highlighting that because Mountaineers books is such an important part of the Mountaineers. It represents almost half of our overall revenues as an organization. And more importantly than that, it actually gives us the opportunity to expand our mission impact and to benefit people across the country and even across the world in the same ways that we do here in the Pacific Northwest. And so it's now my pleasure to introduce our publisher, Tom Helleberg, to share with you some of the outstanding work that Mountaineers Books has been up to lately.
All right, you guys, thank you for the kind words. I think I probably would have preferred a heads up that we were going with the glamorous photos, but just kidding. I don't have any of those. So here's some Tory time with a slug. So as Tom and Gabe have said, Mountaineers Books, we've done a pretty good job through the past 2 years of the pandemic. It's been a very effective way for us to kind of reach readers when kind of programs and activities have been a little curtailed. And so I'm happy to say that we broke through the 500,000 books and maps sold in 2021, and it looks like we're going to do the same in 2022. Again, that's a lot of contacts and a lot of people that are getting quality guidebooks and instruction from Mountaineers, even when things have been a little limited. We strive for a list of 30 new publications per year currently, and we've been close to that mark. We got 29 in 2021. In 2022, we have a little bit of a dip here where we're looking at 21 new titles because ironically, the pandemic has kind of slowed down author production in ways that we hadn't really expected. And, everybody thought we're going to be locked down, we're going to be writing like crazy. And it didn't really pan out that way, where all the disruptions that landed on everyone. So we're looking at 21 books in calendar 22 with a planned 27 new titles coming up in 2023. If you could click to the next one here. I'm going to open with some big news that was just released this morning. Orca by Linda Mapes was selected as the 2022 Washington State Book Award winner for general nonfiction. Very big feather in the cap for the Braided River list and for the House in general. This is a book about the J-pod southern resident orcas that inhabit the Puget Sound region, built upon Linda Mapes's work with the Seattle Times. Excellent win. This book additionally got a silver medal from the Independent Publisher Book Awards earlier in the year. We're just now kicking off the 22 award season, where we have a lot more applications out, a lot more books on nomination and shortlists. So hopefully we'll have some more things to tell you shortly, but some of that news is still hush-hush. Looking back to 2021, we had another big year with 8 of our titles finalists or winning 11 different awards. And in 2020, we had 11 titles win 21 awards, including the Big Thaw, which was a climate science publication in conjunction with the Woods Hole Research Center, won the Washington State Book Award General Nonfiction Award as well. So 2 in 3 years is pretty monumental, and it speaks to the quality of the list. And so with that little kind of overview of the past couple of years worth of publications, I want to turn forward here and go to the next and give a little sneak peek towards what we have coming up in spring of 23. We're currently producing our fall 22 books, and that catalog is available at the Program Center. Those books are in the Program Center bookstore and wherever you buy books as they're released. So this is a little peek ahead, looking 3 to 6 months down the road. We have another major Braided River title, The Living River by Dave Showalter. This is a look. The Braided River approach is to tell visual stories of threatened and sensitive ecosystems through photography. Pair it with a clear narrative that tells you what's there, and try to create deep engagement with the regions through those tools. And so the next title coming up is The Living River, about the Colorado River. The intent here is to have this out prior to the renegotiation of the water treaty for the river. And this is going to be an important book on the same level as Big Thaw and Orca, but a little out of home geography. Going on to the next. We have a couple of very cool guidebooks that are, this is not the entire list of guidebooks, I cherry picked a little here. We've got Sierra Grand Traverse, and we've got the Climber's Guide to the Teton Range. And when we're talking about the way that Mountaineers seeks to lead, engage, and advocate, this is kind of a little bit of broadcast leadership here, where the Sierra Grand Traverse represents a new route, higher than the high route. The authors, the Chapmans, felt that there's a little too much traffic on the Sierra High route, and they wanted something a little more off the beaten track. And so this is a fully new route. And the Teton Range, it's a refreshed edition. This has been a long time in the works because the project has kind of been growing and growing, which is bad for our production managers and bad for our map budget, but it's going to lead to some good deals for people that are interested in a comprehensive guide. We can click it to the next one. We have 2 titles here that are going to build on recent success. We got Campfire Stories Volume 2 by Dave and Alyssa Q. This is a collection of stories about the national parks. Volume 1 was one of our breakout hits. We've got, between the Campfire 1 and then the Campfire Stories deck and Campfire Stories deck for children, we're over 50,000 units between the 3. It's a phenomenal bestseller for us. It broke through all expectations. And so now the Qs are coming back with another edition. Dirty Gourmet Plant Power is a addition to the original Dirty Gourmet book, which is a cool campfire cooking book. It's got kind of different levels where you can have things that are entirely prepared at a campsite. It's got things that are geared for pack, things that are geared for car. This is an edition that's kind of more fully geared towards plant and vegetarian dishes. The first book was kind of skewed in that direction, but this goes fully that way. This has been a hit with REI, outdoor retail, and bookstores generally, kind of a real crossover hit that is now, we're 4 years out from the first book. It's still going strong. We can go to the next tab. Next up, we have The Wanderer by Tom Walker. This is a tab here about a couple of repeat authors with Mountaineers books. Tom Walker's a naturalist and photographer in Alaska. He previously did Wild Shots with us, which is just his kind of life's work of nature photography. In The Wanderer, he's gotten really interesting access to some fish and game GPS data for a single wolf that roamed around Alaska and Yukon territory. And this is kind of reconstructing the wolf's life and travels after they found the collar and the carcass. But very kind of interesting single animal focused natural history. And we got Kelly Brenner's The Naturalist at Home. Her Nature Obscura was one of our award winners from 2021. This is kind of a small scale STEM and natural history book with experiments that people can conduct in their own backyards. We can go to the next tab. And then we get into kind of a little literary run here. We've got the Cascadia Field Guide, which is a combination of art, poetry, and natural history, which looks to kind of characterize and provide color to the region, species by species, with paired art, poetry, and writings about animals in the region. And we got a reissue of Peter Stark's Last Empty Places. This was previously published, but not by Mountaineers Books. It's a book coming from the premise where he took a look at satellite photos and identified the darkest spots in North America and went to see what's there. And spoiler alert, they're not empty at all. There's a lot of things going on, even if there's not power and lights, but it's kind of an exploration of what we think about as remote and wild. And that is a select view of what we got coming up in the next few months. Yeah.
Thanks a bunch, Tom. Yeah, we're just so proud of the work that Mountaineers Books does, and just especially the way that it really expands the ability of us to reach more people and help to connect them with the outdoors and the natural world all across the country and around the world. So great work, Tom. So we've talked a bit about some of our recent highlights and things that are on the immediate horizon, and we want to just give you a brief update on some work that we've been doing now on refreshing our strategic plan over the last year. We've been really hard at work on the update on our strategic plan, and we are looking forward to concluding the process and getting back to the process of really focusing on implementing the plan into next year. But over the course of the next few months, we've got some really critical milestones where we have some opportunities for you all, for our community, to provide us input on where we're going and what our priorities should be. And this is our plan is to culminate that with our November board retreat with the board of directors out at Meany Lodge in November. And so the next couple of months are going to be really important. So so stay tuned for that, and there'll be some great opportunities for you to engage with our draft plan here in the next 2 months. So I wanted to start off just by giving you an idea of some of the kind of the trail markers, if you will, or guiding principles that we've been using to help to guide the refresh of this plan. And I guess at the top of the list is that this is a refresh versus a full rewrite of the plan. And so you're going to see a lot of familiarity in terms of the language and the priorities and whatnot in this plan versus our current plan, Vision 2022. One of the things that's very important to us is to build strong buy-in from our community. The Mountaineers is nothing without our community. And so it's very important for us that we have input, and we've been doing a lot of input from our board, from committees, from our advisory committee, et cetera. And over the course of the next 2 months, there's going to be some really great opportunities for you all to provide us more specific input on where we're going and what our priorities are. We want this plan to be bold, but we have to also have achievable goals as well. And so that's been built into the plan. It's solidly rooted in our mission and values. We've tried really hard to have a clear vision of what future success looks like, and we're kind of taking a long view on this, where we're articulating a view of where we would like to be over the course of the next 10 years. And we're also putting more focus on resourcing and implementation. So one of the things that will probably look familiar to a lot of you who are kind of familiar with our strategic plan, our current strategic plan, is these 3 strategic priorities. We've updated some of the language around these, but I'll step through these really briefly. The first is to lead innovation in outdoor education, and really our vision there is that anyone inspired to learn outdoor skills has that opportunity with the Mountaineers. And that's an example of something that's a pretty bold statement, because today we don't have the capacity to meet all the people that want to join the Mountaineers and learn with us. And so a lot of our focus is on how we can increase our ability to meet more of the people who want to join our community and learn skills with the Mountaineers. The second priority is to engage a vibrant community of outdoor enthusiasts. And the vision on that is that every individual can find inspiration and belonging in the outdoors through Mountaineers community programs and books. One of the things that you'll see as you read the draft strategic plan is that books is much more front and center throughout the entire plan. And this is an example of where that's showing up. But we're really trying to put a focus on under this goal here about what we're doing to engage the next generation of Mountaineers through our youth programs, the work that we're doing in equity and inclusion, and then even things like building a culture of philanthropy and financial support for the Mountaineers in terms of like how we're supporting our ability to expand the mission and impact of the work that we do. And then the final strategic priority is to advocate on behalf of the natural world. And the vision there is that our community makes a meaningful impact in protecting our planet and the outdoor experience. We, in our current strategic plan, we're very focused on conservation advocacy and on reducing our carbon footprint. And our focus gets actually a little bit broader, and we talk about the way that we're partnering with other organizations and continuing to really be focused not only on conserving public lands and our natural places, but also increasingly addressing the more urgent climate crisis. So I want to spend just a minute talking about some of the specific goals that live under each of these three strategic priorities. So we have three goals that live under each of these priorities. We're not going to have time to go too deep on these tonight, but we're going to have in the weeks ahead some focus sessions that we want to invite you to. So if any of these pique your interest in particular, make a note of that. And we've got some sessions coming up between the end of this month and into next month where you can provide some additional feedback on these. There's three goals under lead innovation and outdoor education. The first is to foster a vibrant community of skilled volunteer educators to meet the needs of a growing number of outdoor enthusiasts. And so this one is all about what we're doing to invest in the capacity of our volunteers. What are we doing to support our amazing community of volunteer educators? The second is to invest in new and existing spaces. And this includes indoor, outdoor, and virtual to offer expanded educational opportunities and community connections. We know that that teaching spaces is one of the constraints that we face, whether that's permitting on public lands, whether it's program centers, other places that we can teach. We know that that's a constraint, and our intent is to address that in this plan. And then the final one is speaking to the work that we do through Mountaineers Books is to publish and curate category-leading titles and content in outdoor education. Under engaging a vibrant community of outdoor enthusiasts, we have three goals as well. The first is to cultivate an organizational culture centered around outdoor equity and belonging. And we were intentional about using the term belonging, where we're really talking about what we're doing to really create a sense of people feeling like they have a place in the Mountaineers, and just building on the great work that our equity and inclusion team has been doing over the course of the last 5 years. The second is to expand our youth programs to foster lifelong connections with the outdoors. During my opening highlights, I talked about the amazing growth that we've had in providing more and more youth experiences, and we think we have a great opportunity to continue that growth trajectory and to serve more kids and open the door for them in terms of getting out into the outdoors. And then the final goal, I referenced this before, is to deepen our culture of giving back, where mission and values-driven projects are sourced from and funded by our community. Our success to date has really been so well supported by the generosity of our community, and a lot of the success of this plan is going to be really dependent upon the things that our community says are funding priorities for us. So we've got some big, bold plans here, and it's not going to happen without the support of both our volunteers and our donors. And so continuing to build on that culture of generosity and giving is an important part of this plan. And then last, but certainly not least, under advocate on behalf of the natural world, the first goal is to achieve high impact outcomes for conservation and sustainable recreation access through new and deepened partnerships and policy expertise. And this is really speaking to the importance of the intersection between the work that we do with public land managers, with our elected officials, with partners on making sure that we're not only protecting places, but we also have access to the places that we love to connect with. Secondly is to inspire and equip our community to be highly effective advocates for climate and for the natural world. And this is building on the work that we did in Vision 2022, our current strategic plan, and reducing our own carbon footprint, and really trying to make sure that we're even expanding that to get into things like climate policy and ways that we can engage our community in being a voice for solutions to the climate crisis. And then finally is to act urgently to minimize our organization's impact on the environment. And we've made some tremendous progress in this area, and we intend to continue to do so. We feel like, especially as an organization that's dependent upon the outdoors and addressing some of the challenges that climate is throwing at us, we need to make sure that we're continuing to do a great job of addressing our own climate impact as well. So that will continue to be a priority in this plan. So the last thing that I wanted to mention is this schedule that we have coming up for strategic plan focus sessions. And these are an opportunity for our entire community to come and go quite a bit deeper on those 9 goals that I just went through, and provide us your feedback on the priorities and the things that you think are really most exciting to you in the years ahead. So I don't expect you to be able to to remember all these dates and times. After the session tonight, we'll be posting a recording of this this presentation. Also this presentation itself, and these are all links that are on the website. So so definitely check these out. We'd love to have people sign up and participate in these deeper dive focus sessions that we have. If you have any questions on these, or if you're not able to make a session and want to reach out to me directly, or if you have questions about signing up, reach out to member services or me, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. But we really do want to have your feedback and your input as we're moving forward on the strategic plan. So it's a great opportunity to do so. With that, we're going to transition and talk a little bit about Mountaineers governance. So it's not quite as exciting as I was talking about strategy, but it's a really important part of the Mountaineers and how we operate as a nonprofit. So we have a number of proposed bylaws updates that we're making to membership. And the way that our bylaws are written about proposed changes is that anytime we want to change our bylaws, it has to go back to membership for a full vote. And so this is one of the items that will be on the ballot for membership to vote on next month in our annual elections. So you might be curious about what bylaws are. They're basically just the set of rules that we're required to have as a nonprofit organization by the state of Washington in order to operate. And so it governs everything from the way that our committees operate, the way the board operates, the various leadership roles in the organization, et cetera. And they're all written to be in alignment with a set of Washington state laws that are called the Washington Nonprofit Corporation Act. And so to that end, one of the things that we're proposing in the bylaws amendments that are going for a vote next month is a handful of changes that are related to an update that was made to that law on January of this year. The good news is that our bylaws were actually in really good shape, and so we didn't have a lot of updates to make, but we did a review with our outside attorneys, and they came back with some recommendations on a handful of items that could just make our bylaws a little bit more more tightly aligned with this Nonprofit Corporation Act. So there's a couple of specific things here. Is that voting members of committees of the board are required to be actual board directors, and so this is things like the executive committee and other committees that are actually delegated responsibility from the board to act in the board's stead should that be required. There's some language updates in terms of member notifications and getting rid of some just sort of outdated language around things like teletypes, which, were maybe used 20, 30 years ago, but are not used anymore today. And then there's some updated language in Article 12, Section 4, that clarifies purposes required for inspection of member information, which is a legal requirement that we have as a member-based organization. And if you're interested in digging into that, we've got the full version of both the proposed bylaws updates as well as track changes that are linked from our website, so you can read that in more detail. And on any of these, if you want to reach out to me or a member of our governance committee with any specific questions, please feel free to do so. We can also answer any questions you might have during the Q&A section as well. There's some other changes that we're proposing as well, is that we're proposing to add a new officer role, which would be the VP of Governance. And this is being done in part because the role of the Vice President, which is the chair of the Governance Committee right now, is a really big role to begin with, and they are preparing to then step in as the president in the next term, but also that currently the vice president is a 2-year term, and so we sort of lack continuity in the governance committee, and so adding this officer role would give us the ability to have a longer term as the vice president of or as the chair of the governance committee in that role. The second change is to replace the floor nominations process, which will take place tonight, with an annual open call for nominations process. And this recommendation was being made by the governance committee after 2 successful years of piloting this new open call for nominations process, and really the great results that we've had in terms of surfacing new highly qualified board candidates that will be put forward for election by members. And another one is to change the date of this meeting, the annual meeting, from September to October. And part of why we want to do that is because in October, we would have closed our annual financials. We could share a draft of that with you. And we're a little bit further along with setting priorities for the next year. So that's that would be a change that would take place if this is approved by members. And then there's just a kind of more of a formatting changes, which is moving our approved statement of purposes to Article 2. So in terms of the mechanics of this, these changes were evaluated really over a course of about the last year by the governance committee. They were recommended unanimously by the governance committee. They were evaluated and endorsed unanimously by the board, and are being put forward by approval or for approval by membership in the October election that's coming up. I'd really encourage you all to read the 2022 elections blog, which is linked at the bottom of this page here. And again, this presentation, as well as the recording of this presentation, will be shared on our website after the meeting tonight. But if you have any interest in going deeper into the bylaws or have any questions on that, please check out that blog, and then feel free to reach out directly to me or to another member of our governance committee. We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And with that, I'm going to introduce now Manisha Pawar, who's our Mountaineers Vice President and also the chair of our governance committee, to talk about our at-large nominees.
Thank you, Tom. Hi, everyone. My name is Manisha Pawar. It's my privilege to announce our board of director nominations today and call for any floor nominations as well. So I'll do a quick introduction of the 4 candidates that the governance committee is putting forth as our board of director nominations. Roger Mellum is a 38 years Mountaineer member. He has been a board of director since 2018 and has actively contributed and continues to contribute to our important committees, like chairing the Conservation and Advocacy Committee, chairing the Litigation Committee, as well as he's the vice chair of the Governance Committee. He is an attorney by profession, and he practices security litigation. He's also an instructor. He's done a first ascent of one of the Himalayan mountains. He's been the past president of Washington Wild and has been a longtime leadership council member of Yale School of Environment. Amanda Pirro has been a member since 2013. She is on our Equity and Inclusion Working Group, as well as on Seattle Climbing Committee. She volunteers with many activities in Seattle, in the Mountaineers community. She was a 2021 Key Leader, which is a specific badge we give to leaders that have led more than, I think, 10 or 20 trips or something. So she's a fantastic volunteer. She's a basic graduate and a basic climbing graduate and intermediate climbing student. And she is a partner at and co-founder of a strategy consultancy firm. Sam Sanders has been a member since 2016. She founded our trail running program for the Foothills branch. She has been a super volunteer, again, a very active volunteer with Mountaineers. She's been a super volunteer since 2018, 2019, and 2020. She was involved in multiple activities, has been involved in multiple activities, hiking, backpacking, trail running, skiing, climbing, kayaking, and by profession, she's at Microsoft. Shauna Wong has led multiple courses with the Olympia branch, and she's done multiple courses herself, and she instructs with both climbing as well as snowshoeing. She's an environmental scientist at the Washington State Department of Ecology in Olympia. She also serves on the Equity and Inclusion Committee, Risk Management Committee, and Olympia's Basic Climbing Committee. And in 2017 and 2018, Shauna also served as the branch chair for our Olympia branch. So those are our four active volunteer members that we are also, governance committee is also putting forth as nominations for the board. With that, I would like to call for any floor nominations. All right, sorry, go ahead, Gabe.
Oh, I'm just happy to jump in here and ask again. I think we've always had a tradition of asking 3 times with the floor nominations. And at the point of feeling awkward for the group, I'm more than happy to ask one last time for any nominations. If none, and I'm hearing none, I think at this point we're going to open it up for Q&A and discussion. So thank you for Tom and Manisha for all the updates. It's been really amazing to see that, and I hope everybody else found value in hearing what's been going on with the organization over the last little while, what we have on the horizon. So I'll stop talking, and if you're able to, please use the raise hand feature to ask your questions. It'll just help queue people up a little bit better. Also, feel free to put it in the chat.
It's an awkward Zoom silence.
We're not above calling on people.
You know, maybe I'll start with a question to myself. We a couple of weeks ago we had our 50-year member luncheon, and one of the things that especially a lot of our longtime members have been really curious about and really concerned about is the status of the lawsuit of that Keto Legacy Foundation filed against the Mountaineers, and I've had a lot of folks reach out to me and ask if there's been any updates on that. And the quick answer on that is that we haven't really had many updates on that. We're kind of in a quiet period now where we're waiting. We filed back in December what's called a motion for summary judgment, and essentially that's a petition to the court to ask them to throw the case out based on lack of merits. And we got an initial what's called a report and recommendation back on that, and it was very favorable to the Mountaineers. But then that has to be approved or evaluated and then approved ultimately by the federal judge who is assigned to our case. We don't have a date as to when we'll hear back from the judge. We don't actually even have a trial date, and apparently the courts are really backed up from the pandemic and everything else. So we're kind of in a waiting period, but like we've said before, we are committed to sharing updates as we learn more information, and we're committed to resolving this in a way that's really in the best interests of the organization, especially our donors. So some more to come on that, but I thought it'd be worth giving you just a very brief update on that tonight. And certainly feel free to reach out to me if you have any any more detailed questions or concerns. Jim Burke, great. We've got one to ask us a question. Hopefully it's a softball.
So Tom, yes, I was part of the group here working on Tacoma. We have a little bit more challenge about our property up in Seattle. Could you talk a little bit about the challenges we faced getting that to net zero?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jim. So, probably a lot of you are aware that we've done a lot of work at the Seattle Program Center to reduce our carbon footprint. About 3 or 4 years ago, we were able to install a solar array on our roof. So we're producing a ton of electricity throughout the year, and have been able to really offset a lot of our consumption of carbon with the Seattle Program Center. The big issue we've got in the Seattle Program Center now. We've also done a lot of work on LCD and reducing our overall consumption of electricity. The big issue with the Seattle Program Center is that all of our heating and hot water systems are natural gas. So we're burning carbon anytime that we have to heat the building, et cetera. The other issue, if you've ever been at the Program Center on a really warm day and you're at a program in Goodman Auditorium or Cascade, you know that it is super hot there. And it's because we don't have air conditioning in the full building. And so one of the things that we hope to do in the years ahead is to replace that natural gas system with heat pumps that will be allow us to essentially use all that electricity that we're producing with a solar array to heat the building in the winter, but air condition it on the days when it's hot, and basically get to net zero. It's pretty expensive, so we're working through some ideas on ways we can raise some funds, maybe get some grants, some other ways we can fund it. It's got to make financial sense for the organization, but we're also committed to getting the Seattle Program Center to net zero here in the coming years as well.
Jan has his hand up.
Yeah, hello. This is Jan from the Seattle branch, Basic Climbing Committee. I have a question regarding the website, and both in terms of internal display. So as a program leader, load times are just very, very long, but also external facing. When you look for route descriptions, every other web page shows up immediately. The Mountaineers, you wait for half a minute, and then just a simple text file shows up. I wonder what plans are there to make this better on both ends.
Yeah, thanks, Jan. I can start that off, and I don't know if Christina's on, or I don't know if Jeff Bowman is on tonight or not. But there are a couple of things, Jan, that we did that we're actually doing right now to address some of the performance issues that you noted on the website. And we know that there have been some performance issues on the website, so I want to just say that up front. And we're working aggressively to address those because we know it's an impact both for members, but especially for volunteers that are administering courses and whatnot. The couple of things in the very near term, and I'm not going to go too deep into the technical stuff here, but one is that we're actually upgrading the version of Plone that the website runs on, which is basically the underlying language of our website. And then the other thing that we're doing right now is we're upgrading the version of the software language on Python that it's written in. And both of those things, from what we are told by the engineers that support our website, will help in the very near term in terms of some of those performance issues. The other thing is that the server that is at Amazon Web Services that powers our website is up for it's at the end of its lease in December, and we're going to be upgrading that server so it has higher capacity, especially when we have kind of peak loads that are impacting the website and impacting the performance of it. So those are some of the things that we think over the course of the next few months are gonna give us some performance benefits on the website and address some of the we've in the budget we proposed, or that we're proposing to the board for next year. We're going from what we normally do, which is about 3 or 4 iterations in a good year, which are kind of the development cycles that we go through, to 6 this coming year, which is basically about the maximum that we can do with our current level of resourcing. And what that's going to allow us to do is to not only continue to address some of the performance issues on the site, but most importantly, that we've got a big backlog of feature requests that we've heard from our community. And so we're going to be trying to work through those as rapidly as we can.
Mm-hmm.
I can't claim that those are going to be silver bullets and it's going to address everything. But what I do want everyone to realize is that we know we've got some issues. We're really taking it seriously, and we're trying to put the resourcing and the investment against that in the immediate term as well as in the next fiscal year. And hopefully I didn't misstate anything from a technology standpoint. I'm like an economics person, not a technologist, but hopefully that answer makes sense. So.
Tom, I'll jump in here. Hi, everyone. This is Christina Ciari. I'm the Membership and Communications Director, and I also oversee our Technology IT Associate Director. And Tom did a great job of highlighting the changes and investments we're going to be making, and I saw a lot of nodding heads. So thank you all for your patience and understanding. I just wanted to call out that, during the pandemic, we were doing 1, maybe 2 iterations a year. So for the last 2.5 years, we really dialed back our technology investment, which is why we're doing an outsized investment this year. But that is directly the result of why we're in the situation we're in now with some of these issues. I would also say, Jan, if you're running into something where like it's consistently not loading, that sounds like it's potentially a bug or an error that we could address. So if you're having something like that, please always email info@mountaineers.org, and then we can help troubleshoot that. I think half of the challenge is that we hear anecdotally about problems from our community, but they're not actually reported to us. So everyone on this call, I really encourage you, even if you think it's something small, to please email us about it. Give us as much detail as you can, what browser you were using, what computer you're on, etc. And that will help us be able to actually troubleshoot some of these issues that might be not as widespread as something that we would catch otherwise.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the comprehensive answers. That's really good to hear.
Thanks, Jan. I think Peter's next, and then we'll answer Stephen's question here in the chat.
Thanks, Gabe. I'm going back to the solar issue. We're about a dozen years downstream from a 40-panel display in our barn, and one of the 2 inverters has apparently failed. So my question is, do we have a dedicated capital replacement or maintenance fund in order to support our solar endeavors?
Yeah, it's a great question, Peter. I would say the honest answer right now is no. We know that well, let me back up. One of the things we did in the last year is we did a capital needs assessment of our lodges, and we have a plan in the next year or so to do the same kind of thing for our program centers. And essentially what that means is that we're trying to, say like a home, things are going to break, things are going to need to be upgraded, things are going to need to be, fixed over a period of time. And so as an organization that owns or is operating lease properties, we need to have a plan where we're anticipating, what things are going to be, necessary to be, fixed or replaced in the future. And the inverters on solar is something that, they do break from time to time, from what I understand. And so, we're going to need to have a budget set aside for that. So that is one of the things that we'll be working on with our Vice President of Outdoor Centers, Matt Simerson, in the next year, is putting together a similar plan for the program centers we have for the lodges now, and trying to get out ahead of that curve, because it's something that, we've been a little bit more reactive than I would like to be in the future. So, so it's I think a very valid concern and something that we're committed to addressing.
Thanks, Tom.
Well, I'm happy to take a first shot at Stephen's question here in the chat, and hopefully you all can see it, but he's asking about the floor nominations, the proposed bylaw change to eliminate the floor nominations process. And I'm gonna hopefully not got too far back, but I believe it was about 3 years ago when I was actually just joining the governance committee, when we had gotten a recommendation from our attorney that we update certain aspects of the bylaws, and one of them was actually around floor nominations. And this is, and hopefully I'm not going to go again too deep. Many decades ago, there was this push around organizations, and particularly for a number of organizations that had membership bases, to change to a like a C6 or business league type structure. And I work in nonprofits, so I get pretty wonky and nerdy on this stuff, so bear with me. And many of the floor nominations process and membership pieces are relics of that structure. And as we've started to modernize some of the bylaws and governance for the organization, this was one piece that popped up. Now, that being said, we also see this as a really important piece for the organization. The engagement of membership in within the Mountaineers is always high, and it's part of what makes this community and organization awesome. And so we wanted to come up with something that was a good alternative that's in line with the best practices in the sector. And so when we came up with the open nominations process, we actually did this in not partnership, but in conversations with other organizations to ensure that we are following some best practices, to learn from each other and share with each other around what we were developing. And the process, I know that many of the people on this call were actually involved in developing that process, and we feel really good about it. You know, we're 2 years in now, and I think at this point we feel much more comfortable about removing the full nominations process, because we do have this alternative that's in line with the best practices of the sector. And I think most importantly, I think the new process really is based on the idea of equitable inclusion, and the full nominations process just is not. And so as we as we continue on the journey of becoming a more inclusive organization where everybody feels a sense of belonging, this is one small step in that process, but it's an important step. And so that's part of the rationale. I'm sure others on the call will have some different perspectives to share, but hopefully that provides a little bit of context as to why we're making that change. And happy to answer any additional questions related to it, or if others want to chime in if I misrepresented anything. And again, my apologies. I go deep in some of this stuff. Oh, Jim, I see your hand back up.
Yes, you did. I had one more question. I hate to put Tom on the spot. One of the biggest issues in carbon footprint for the Mountaineers is transportation. Can you talk about some thoughts, we've been talking about as far as ways that we're going to begin approaching that?
Yeah, it's a great question, Jim. So we have a committee called the Carbon Footprint Reduction Committee. Jim's a member of that. Betsy, myself, Connor from staff, and some others. And you know, transportation, obviously, to get to and from classes, events, you know, from field trips, et cetera, is part of our organization's carbon footprint. But it's also a tough one to get your arms around, because you know that transportation to and from those activities is actually not considered a part of the Mountaineers activity, but we know that it's also, you know, realistically is a part of the carbon footprint of the organization in terms of, you know, the impact that we're having. And so one of the ways that we've been thinking about that is how can we give people the opportunity to make a contribution when they're signing up for a course, or when they're going on a field trip or an event or something like that, to make a contribution towards the efforts that we have going on to reduce our own carbon footprint. And that's a little different than the approach that some other organizations take, where they purchase offsets. And for any of you that have looked into carbon offsets for things like airline travel or whatever else, some of the programs are honestly kind of dubious. You know, they're going towards things that are well intentioned, but you know, it might be for tree planting in the Amazon or something that, you know, you have no guarantee that the trees that are being planted are even going to be existing 100 years from now. And so the approach that we're taking, and you're going to hear more about this in the months ahead, is to give folks the opportunity to voluntarily offset some of the impact of their own transportation by participating in Mountaineers programs towards a fund that would go to help us to address some of these projects, like the getting the Seattle Program Center to net zero. So some more to come on that, but that's some of the result of some of the work and the thinking that we've had that's been going on within the CFR community. Did I miss anything there, Jim?
Nope, you're right on, Tom. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah, you bet.
This might be a good opportunity just to make a quick plug for the upcoming event, the Evening of Advocacy event the Mountaineers are hosting on September 24th, I believe.
24th. Yeah.
24th. Well, we'll be talking a bit more about this. So I'll drop a link to that in the chat too. Hopefully, if you're able to join, it should be a lot of fun. And let's see, I think
Paul's got his
Paul,
hand
yep,
up there.
Paul, you want to jump in with a question?
Unmute. Can you hear me? That's good. So a non-technical question, on the spot, but and this to you, Tom. When you've chatted with maybe people at the AAC or the Colorado climbing groups or Spokane, do you get a sense of where we stand on, you know, the whole COVID thing and all the shutdown and coming back? Are we? What's your sense of it, where we stand and how's it going, and then in comparison to what you've heard from other clubs?
Yeah, you know, so I think that the trajectory that we've been on of coming out of the pandemic and restarting programs and everything else, I would say is pretty similar to other organizations. Although I will say that I'm really proud of the work that we've done, that we did as navigating that, and actually the Mountaineers was kind of looked to by a lot of our peer organizations as a model for how we were thinking about our COVID response, and the policies we're putting in place, and trying to be as flexible as possible with our community, but really focusing on the safety of participants and volunteers and whatnot. So I would say that we're doing definitely as well, and probably a little bit better than some of those other peer organizations. Where I think we're doing very, very well is that we navigated this crisis that we're coming out of in a way that was pretty rigorous, and it required a huge team effort. I mean, it was volunteers, the board, staff. We all made a lot of sacrifices. We took full advantage of a lot of the programs that were available, relief programs, et cetera. And without going into any specifics, I mean, I think that some other organizations in our space and otherwise are having a harder time of it than the Mountaineers are. And I think it's just a testament to the fact that we were pretty serious about the fact that it was a big threat to us, and we navigated the crisis in a way that was was pretty nuanced, and we're coming out of things coming out of this crisis in a pretty good shape. And so we're not totally out of the woods. I mentioned that before, but I think that the job that we did has really positioned us to to really respond to the fact that people are ready to get back outdoors and get into our courses, and we're seeing the evidence of that in the membership growth and some of the other metrics that I shared earlier.
Thank you.
I know Brad has a question here in the chat, which is around increased volunteerism with the Mountaineers. If there's any highlights, challenges, or positives to share that have been top of mind lately when it comes to volunteerism within the organization. And I'm not sure, Brad, did you want to add anything onto that or?
Yeah, there's an advisory council to the Mountaineers. Some are involved on this call and some might not be, but I know that's been a topic that the Mountaineers is very focused on. And I'm very appreciative that the Mountaineers is aware of the challenges around volunteer or just the number and volume of volunteers available in the community in the last few years. I'm involved with a number of other nonprofit and volunteer organizations that are all experiencing very similar challenges that the Mountaineers are, which is a bit of a limited or decreased amount of people willing and able to volunteer in our community. And so I'm, for one, appreciative that the volunteers of the Mountaineers are aware of it, that the staff and the executive team on the Mountaineers are focusing on it. And I was just curious if there was any kind of updates we could share with the rest of the team. But
yeah, I don't know if there's anything that Becca would like to chime in on this, but one thing that I would mention, Brad, is I think a thing that's specific, a challenge that was specific to the Mountaineers when we went into the pandemic. We shut down our programs in 2020, and then restarting them with lower levels. Is that one of the downstream impacts of that is that a lot of, when we reduced our course size and we canceled courses in 2020, et cetera, a lot of those folks would have in normal years been a new crop of volunteers that would have come back and helped with courses in the following years. And so by sort of interrupting that, that natural flywheel kind of process that we have, that was a very specific challenge that the Mountaineers went through. And so a lot of that, a lot of the burden that then fell on existing volunteers and everything else. And so, and I know a lot of you are kind of part of that process. And so, one, I just want to thank everyone for hanging with us, because it required a lot of our, long time, really dedicated volunteers to sort of double down on their support. And it's one of the reasons why I think it's so important that we get back to our pre-pandemic levels in the coming year and get our, courses kind of working in a way that was, sort of more normal and everything else, because then it refills that pipeline of new volunteers that are like, enthusiastic and ready to, come and help for the next year's programs and everything else. And part of how we do that is by getting programs, back up and running and everything. But then part of it is all the work that we're doing to recognize folks, to invest in their development. And so, our commitment to the leadership development and support that we have, both through our branches and also centrally is vitally important. But anyway, I'd love to hear, Becca, what, if you've got anything you'd like to add to that, that's kind of Mountaineer specific.
Yeah, I think that, along the lines of what folks are saying, during a couple of things happened. One is during especially the heart of the pandemic, a number of people just simply didn't feel comfortable being around other people, which is 100% reasonable. So there were fewer volunteers available to kind of keep that community going. And I think now there's a group of folks who've put in sort of above and beyond time in the past 2 years and are needing to reinvest in themselves this year, and maybe doing a little bit less this year. At the same time, there's been this realization that it's actually really fun and rewarding to teach small groups of 8 rather than groups of 40. And that in the near term creates a scale problem in terms of our ability to serve people and needing more volunteers to do so. But I really think that actually in some cases, our courses became so big that it became hard to recruit volunteers because it was lacking that tight community. And it's the small courses that get a lot of volunteer return because there's a tight community. So I actually think this is kind of an opportunity for a reset in how we develop our future volunteers and instructors, and really build that community in a small course format that we can scale by having more small format courses rather than these kind of large courses. So I think there's an opportunity there, and it will probably feel a little. Okay, so sorry about that. So Yeah, I think that folks are really thinking about how to support volunteers and how to listen to volunteers, which is challenging because if folks are saying, gosh, we really want to reduce this course from 40 to 25 students, the most important thing is that we're supporting the experience of our volunteers, because those are the folks who are going to be mentors going forward. And it'll just be a little bit of growing pains.
Thank you. No, I take away from that like 3 quick things. Number one, I'm thankful for those that do volunteer in the Mountaineers. We can just celebrate the heck out of those people. Second, I hope that there is a future renaissance of people that really want to contribute and volunteer in the Mountaineers. I think that's hopefully on our horizon, and we're looking forward to that. Third, that might be a call to those that are on this meeting to volunteer within the Mountaineers. Hint, hint. Thank you.
Well, I think, the other thing I don't know if folks saw the comment that Honora put in the chat box, but I think, that's another, it's another opportunity we have is that oftentimes, my own experience, in some of the program side that I've volunteered with is that, there are folks that are willing to come back and excited to come back and volunteer the next year. And what are we doing to like kind of steward that process of like getting them engaged and everything. And so, just another plug for the strategic plan. I think that's one of the things that we have an opportunity to create some more systemic processes and structures around how we're supporting, engaging people that are coming out of our courses really, I'm stoked about, the experience they just had and are willing to volunteer, but are we making that easy and transparent for them?
To add, actually going back to Jan's question around technology, how to make it not painful too. It should be a fun process, and there's a lot of administration associated with courses and all of that, and it's important, but we also want to make sure that's as easy as possible, and that's something that certainly has been talked about quite a bit during the strategic planning process. So any other questions or comments? We've got the time. This is not the only time you can ask questions. You can always feel free to reach out to anybody on the board or on staff with questions or follow-up.
Gabe, can I throw in just a quick comment to really encourage folks to check out the strategic planning and focus sessions. This is something that, the draft strategic plan is a board and staff collaboration, but this is an organization of 15,000 members. And what's really going to make a strong strategic plan is having input from the folks who can help to implement it. And so we would love to have as many voices as possible at these meetings so that we can know what the priorities are and focus on, what the right order of operations is. So would love for you all to encourage folks in your committees or folks who you go outside with to also join these sessions. They're on Zoom. You can turn your screen off and eat dinner while you're on it if you want, but we'd really love to have as many folks as possible join those sessions.
If you didn't see it, Robert posted the link to the Investing in Volunteers session in the chat. So easy opportunity to register for that. What do you think, Tom? We're happy to sit as long as people would like to take to formulate questions, but
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll draw it to a close here unless there's any other questions, but just, want to echo what we've said earlier, that we really are grateful for your support of the Mountaineers community, and it was really wonderful to see so many folks join us tonight for the annual meeting. And if you have any feedback on either any of the specific things we talked about tonight or the format, especially as we think about next year and hopefully moving the annual meeting from September to October, we really want this to be a valuable way of you getting updated on the health of the organization, where we're going, and everything else. So pass along any feedback that you might have for us. But thanks a bunch for joining us tonight. Any final words, Gabe, from your standpoint?
No, well, actually, yeah, maybe I'll add, just when I think back at the question around volunteers, and I think about just my time with the organization, and particularly going into the pandemic, how much I saw the volunteers really step up in this really unique way. It really inspired me to do more and want to do more. And that momentum is contagious. And it's one of the reasons why I'm sure we're all still around with the organization. And so just wanted to give a shout out and say thank you to all the volunteers, because it makes me want to do more myself. And that's all I got to say.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Have a terrific night, and look forward to seeing you all soon.